Welcome. I want you to imagine a time not so long ago when the world map was just full of blank spaces, a time when sailing off the edge of everything you knew was the most dangerous and maybe the most exciting thing a person could possibly do. Today, we're jumping right into that time, the age of exploration. This is an epic story of bravery, of unimaginable riches, and a quest that would change the world forever, all because people wanted, well, you're about to find out. Okay, so let's start with a big question. Before all the stuff we think of as valuable today, there was something so precious that entire kingdoms would risk everything, and I mean everything, to get their hands on it. And the crazy part? You probably have some in your kitchen right now. So what do you think it was? What was once literally worth more than gold? Yep, spices. It sounds unbelievable, right? But simple things like pepper, cloves, and cinnamon were the absolute treasures of the 15th century. Think of them like the oil, the gold, and the hottest tech stock of their day, all rolled into one. And the burning desire to get them was about to kick off one of the most daring adventures in all of human history. So why this crazy obsession with spices? Well, to really get a grip on the incredible journeys we're about to follow, we first have to understand the powerful forces that were pushing these explorers out onto the wild, totally unknown oceans. What was this call to adventure they were all hearing? It was really a mix of a whole bunch of powerful motivations, all happening during this amazing time of new ideas called the Renaissance. Number one on the list, of course, was finding that sea route for spices. But it was also about that classic search for gold and silver, a powerful desire to spread their religion, and just that basic human curiosity to see what's over the next horizon. And, you can't forget about national pride and the dream of personal glory. For countries like Portugal and Spain, becoming a famous hero was a pretty big deal.
Let's just think about this for a second. Imagine a world with no refrigerators. Spices weren't just about making food taste good, they were absolutely essential for keeping meat from going bad. The big problem was that the land routes to get them were controlled by all these middlemen who kept hiking up the price. So the big idea was simple, but it was a total game changer. Find a way to get there by sea, cut out all those middlemen, and whichever country did it first, they would become powerful and unbelievably rich.
And that's where our story really begins, with our first hero, a Portuguese captain named Bartholomeus Diaz. He was given a mission that sounded pretty much impossible: sail south, down the coast of Africa, and find out if you could actually get around it. He was, quite literally, sailing off the map. So just look at this map. Starting from Portugal, Diaz had to navigate this huge, uncharted coastline. No one in Europe had any idea how far South Africa went or what kind of dangers were waiting for him. But he had to find that southern tip. It was the key that could unlock the entire sea route to the east. And incredibly, he did it. After fighting massive storms and dealing with a terrified crew, in 1488, Diaz and his ships rounded the southern tip of Africa. I mean, this was a massive achievement. For that time, this was like landing on the moon. He had proved that a sea route to India wasn't just a fantasy, it was actually possible. Okay, so Diaz had cracked the door open, but he hadn't gone all the way through. That job would go to another Portuguese explorer, a guy whose name would echo through history, Vasco da Gama. His mission was to take the path Diaz had found and finish the job, to actually reach the ultimate prize, India itself. So, following that trail Diaz had blazed, da Gama rounded the Cape. But where Diaz and his crew had turned back, da Gama pushed on. He sailed up the eastern coast of Africa and then made this incredibly bold move, a leap of faith across the massive, unknown Indian Ocean, heading straight for the source of all those precious spices. So about 9 years after Diaz's huge discovery, da Gama set sail. By May of 1498, he'd done it. He reached the shores of India. And when he finally made it back to Portugal a year later, his ships were stuffed with a fortune in spices. The quest was over. Portugal now controlled the sea route, and honestly, the world was never going to be the same again. But this amazing success came at a terrible cost. The journey home was just brutal. With no fresh fruits or vegetables for months and months, the sailors were hit by this horrific disease called scurvy. On that final 3-month trip across the Indian Ocean, many of da Gama's crew died. It's a really grim reminder that the price of all this discovery was often paid in blood. Now, these voyages weren't just about fighting the ocean. They were about meeting new people for the very first time. And that brings us to a really crucial and tragic moment from Diaz's journey, what we think is the first meeting between Europeans and the native people of southern Africa. So, the year is 1488. The place is a spot called Mossel Bay, on the coast of what is now South Africa. Diaz's ships, beaten up by the sea, pull into this bay and they are desperate for fresh water. On the shore, the local Khoi people are watching these totally alien ships arrive. This moment, it could have gone so many different ways.
To really get what happened next, you've got to try and see the world through two completely different pairs of eyes. For the sailors, they'd been at sea forever. They were thirsty, desperate. They saw a freshwater spring and only thought about one thing, water. But for the Khoi herders, that spring was everything. It was the lifeblood of their community, a sacred resource you protect, not something you just take. Two worlds were about to crash into each other.
And a conflict was almost guaranteed to happen. The Khoi tried to defend their water, maybe by shouting or throwing stones. The sailors, not understanding the culture or the situation, saw this as an attack. And in the chaos that followed, Bartholomew Diaz himself fired a crossbow, and a Khoi man was killed. It was a terribly violent and tragic start to the long and very complicated relationship between Europe and Southern Africa.
You know, that sad story really shines a light on the darker side of this whole era. Because while the captains and the kings were getting famous and rich, what was life actually like for the normal guys, the ordinary sailors who made these trips happen? What was the real price of discovery for them?
Well, for the common sailor, life on one of these ships was often just awful. For the big trading companies that came later, like the Dutch East India Company, it was basically a living nightmare. Diseases like scurvy and plague spread like wildfire in the dirty, cramped spaces below deck. The food was terrible, mostly rock-hard biscuits and salty, rotting meat. And if the disease didn't get you, you still had to worry about giant storms, pirate attacks, or even your own crew turning against the captain. Okay, wow, we have covered a lot of ground, sailing from Portugal all the way around Africa to India and back. So now let's slow down and lock in on exactly what you need to remember. This next slide has the 5 absolute must-know facts from this whole story. Ready? All right, let's nail these down. 1. What was the goal? It was all about spices, finding a sea route to Asia to control that incredibly valuable trade. 2. Who were our heroes? You've got Diaz, the first guy to get around Africa's tip in 1488, and then Da Gama, who finished the race and got to India in 1498. 3. Remember that story about first contact? That meeting at Mossel Bay between Diaz and the Khoi ended in a tragic fight over water. 4. What were their key tools? They had new ships called caravels that could handle the ocean and the magnetic compass to find their way. And finally, number 5, the big picture. This whole thing was part of the Renaissance, a huge explosion of new ideas and curiosity that was totally changing how people saw the world. So just think about that for a second. This entire global revolution, it all started with something simple, a search for a way to make food taste better and last longer. And it ended with new empires, new conflicts, and a completely redrawn map of the world. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How did a quest for flavor end up completely reshaping our planet? Thanks so much for joining me on this journey.